Wow, you guys are in for a treat because we're going to be doing a deep dive into the website trickedbythelight.com. It is a wealth of information for NDEers, Gnosticism, ancient philosophy. If you are not initiated and this subject is a little strange to you, please turn this off now and go back to Netflix. You do not belong in this saloon. This saloon is not for you and you need to leave. So if you do like this information, let's get into it. So I'm going to extrapolate on the idea of David Icke and the term he coined, the Saturn moon matrix. And, you know, he has a lot of knowledge. He's gone pretty deep, but I felt like when it came to specifically the moon and Saturn, he barely brushed the surface on what role these planets play in our realm. Because our realm operates like a well-oiled machine. We have a sky clock. The planets and the stars move in the same pattern every night. Same with the sun and the moon. The moon waxes and wanes. I'm going to guess that reincarnation also works as a well-oiled machine. It's not like you just randomly, your soul goes somewhere and comes back into another random body. It's definitely a process. And again, we can safely assume reincarnation is real using the scientific method. There are parents of children who recall having past lives. The parents introduced the kids to the families that they knew in their previous reincarnation, and they answered questions that only their previous self could have possibly known. So they had a hypothesis, they made an observation, and then they were able to repeat this several times with many different children. This has occurred. So that fits everything that would satiate science in order to make this a legitimate phenomenon that occurs. Not only that, but we have first hand witness accounts like demonstrated on this website. And I'm going to read one from a subject named Katie W., where she says, after she died and came back, then all of the sudden I was rapidly sucked into what I thought was this full moon. That night the moon was a silver. So this was the light that NDEers talk about. So yeah, a lot of NDEers say that they feel like they're being recycled back to Earth over and over again, and then the moon sucks them in. So I'm starting to think that the moon might play a role here in our reincarnation. Take, for example, the DreamWorks logo, too. It's a kid sitting on the moon fishing, like fishing for souls, it seems like. But what I really want to get into is this book I'm reading by Joseph Campbell titled Myths of Light, Eastern Metaphors of the Eternal. I'm going to assume you guys know Joseph Campbell. He's like the most famous anthropologist. And what I've been doing recently is he has a wealth of knowledge on Eastern philosophy. And I've been connecting the info he's found on Eastern philosophy to Gnosticism. And I've been finding some really interesting connections. For example, here's the Vedas, the Vedics from the Indus Valley and their interpretation of the moon. And I'm going to read that passage now. He says, through comparative study of these contemporaneous cultures, we come to understand that the horns of the bull were equated with the horns of the moon. The moon is in turn a symbol of death and resurrection, the eternal recurrence. The moon remains the high symbol of the dead and resurrecting God. Even the Christian image of the resurrection has elements of this symbolism inherent in it. Christ spends 3 days in the tomb, just as the moon is 3 days dark, and the dating of Easter is always made in relation to the full moon. So yeah, I always thought it was interesting that a Christian holiday starts during a full moon lunar cycle. So I continue. The moon can also be thought of as a cup that fills with ambrosia, is emptied and then refilled. In the tropical world, the sun is fierce and burning and desiccates the vegetation. The night moon sends down the dew, the ambrosia, the amrita, the drink of immortality that refreshes life. The moon, of course, is in a constant state of emptying and refilling. You see it every month and then unload its ambrosia onto the earth and fill it again. So let's look at the exact definition of the term ambrosia. Ambrosia means the food of the gods from Greek and Roman mythology. And that connects with Gnosticism when we look at us in our soul, in a way, our souls being food for the archons. I'm just going to put it bluntly there. So I thought that was an interesting connection. It's like when we die, our souls go to the moon fills up with lights, with the light of our souls, then dumps it back onto Earth when it wanes. It's like the Ouroboros. It's the recurrence. It's just this eternal cycle that happens again and again. And that could be a part of this mechanism that facilitates our constant return to this realm. So now let's move on to Saturn. So the devilish horn god Pan, the satyr from Saturn, and satanic occult hidden meaning behind Disney's Peter Pan. Yeah, Pan is a satyr, which is a two-legged goat being that uses a flute to hypnotize people. This flute emits a frequency, and Pan's able to get people to do what he wants. Kind of like this idea of Saturn emitting this frequency that's affecting our minds. Like, the reason I bring this up is because there's a lot of satanic rituals that focus on Saturn, garnishing favor with Saturn in order to influence the world. Of course, there's a lot of observation that we've made of certain elites from like corporations and other aspects of our world that seem to worship Saturn, like in, big music festivals and in corporate logos, all that stuff, all that good stuff. So there seems to be a pattern here with that. Peter Pan, there's just a lot of occult symbolism in Disney. Like you notice in a lot of Disney movies, they're always wishing upon the morning star, which is Venus, which is represented by Lucifer. Hollywood, of course, coming from the Hollywood, which is what the wands the Druids used, were made from. So yeah, this website is awesome. It also talks about, when it comes to the moon, how the Joker in the 1980s Batman said to Batman, "Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? I ask that of all my victims." And that kind of ties in. Now that starts to make some sense if you adopt this line of thinking where, you die and you're sent to the moon. So this obviously comes off as an out there theory, but hopefully I'm explaining it okay. I mean, I can say whatever I want. I'm the boss. I'm my own boss. So let's also look into Soul, the Pixar movie, and their interpretation of the White Tunnel of Light. Yeah, they make it look like a bug zapper. And all the other souls are just hypnotized going straight towards it. Just all apathetic, not even thinking. Of course, it's just a Pixar movie, but it fits in with what I'm talking about. And then we also look at the sounds from Saturn recorded by NASA. I mean, it sounds like screaming. It's emitting some loud frequency. Knowing NASA, they could have just recorded a couple cats fighting in an alleyway and said it was Saturn, but it fits with my theory, so I'm going to use it here. Anyway, if you haven't heard it yet, also check out my interview with Howdy Mikowski. If you go on my channel, it's not under videos, it's under live since we streamed it. We talk about this subject, so if this sort of stuff fascinates you, he is a wealth of knowledge. He's a well-known author. He's done countless interviews, and so many people have said that I was asking him questions and no one else has ever asked him. Like, we dove so deep into these subjects. So, yeah, you'll love that if you check that out. All right, yeah, so I'm going to continue to read more Joseph Campbell and make my connections between Eastern philosophy and Gnosticism, and I'll relay that information back to you. trickbythelight.com, I recommend it. So, yeah, if you're interested, check that out. And thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.